So what I'm doing is we are going live on YouTube and I will record. So when I will do this, when I do this, you can start. Okay.
I start with share, isn't it?
Yeah, you first share and keep things ready. You can share. Ma'am, please make it full screen. Yeah.
Yeah, slideshow. Yes.
So I will tell you when we are starting. Yes. Just a minute. Yes. So I'm starting recording.
Yeah.
Ma'am,
Resume.
please make full screen.
Share is not coming now.
Yeah. So you'll have to go down next to comments. Yeah. Where your arrow is, no,
Comment,
ma'am?
there is one.
Next to that. One, two, three more. Yeah.
Three
One
more.
next to that. Next to that.
Next
Yeah.
one.
One more. Press that button. Yes. Click
Double
that.
click, is it?
Yeah.
It's not coming.
Otherwise, you can go up, go to slideshow. In the topmost layer, there is something known as slideshow.
Yeah.
Resume slideshow, ma'am. There is a below, if you go.
But it's not coming.
Yeah, there is a gray, resume slideshow. Yeah, click down. Little down. Yes, ma'am.
Resume slideshow, it's not coming. What happened?
So,
Shall I go back to my
yeah, go back. Yeah,
desktop?
go back. Yeah. So unshare and come back again. Yeah. Just stop. Yeah. Stop the PowerPoint. So first stop sharing and then come back. Yeah.
Activation.
Yes. Now again reshare again.
Yeah.
Yes, this is perfect. Yes. So Dr. Shashikala, welcome you to ISCP webinar. You can start your talk now. Thank you.
Good evening. I'll be presenting some perspectives on health and rehabilitation models redefined in 21st century. This is the first of I see the IACP webinars, and we thought it worthwhile to begin with some basics. So we all are familiar with this definition of WHO, which was taught to us in our preventive and social medicine classes. This definition was given in the year 1948. Health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of sickness or infirmity. This definition is not well accepted even now. There are a lot of controversies, but it is still continuing with it, and we have some operational definitions which I'll see later. Rehabilitation is defined as a set of interventions needed when a person is experiencing or is likely to experience limitations in everyday functioning due to aging or a health condition, including chronic diseases or disorders, injuries, or trauma. Now, this was the past, and now we come to the present. What is the definition of health now? This was in the year 1984. WHO responded to the criticism and modified the definition, which I presume is there in the curriculum and in the text now on preventive and social medicine. Health is the extent to which an individual or group is able to realize its aspirations and satisfy needs and to change or cope with the environment. You see the new addition of group or individuals. The definition of rehabilitation continues to be the same. Only thing is, earlier the interventions referred only to the medical interventions, and social interventions did not have any place, but now it includes more and more social interventions. So the operational definition of health now is coping, adapting, and managing any impairment. By impairment, we mean change in structure and function, discussed by Mathild and Huber in the year 2011. This is an operational definition, is yet to be ratified by the WHO. The basic difference between the previous and the present definition is very obvious. There is no mention of any other factors other than the person's response to the disease process. Earlier, disability was defined as a state, but now disability is an experience of limitation or restriction in functional ability. What do we mean by functional ability? Attributes that enable people to be and to do what they have reason to value, determined by intrinsic capacity, the environment they inhabit, and the interaction between the two. Wonderful words. Kindly note the word intrinsic capacity and the interaction between the intrinsic capacity and the environment in which they live. After all this, now rehabilitation is now a part of the universal health coverage, is one of the parts of the sustainable development goals of the WHO now. Now, let's think, why did this change happen? Earlier, the earlier definitions was concerned with disease in person, but now we are concerned with the person in disease. That should make us think. Like all sciences, the science of rehabilitation and child development from Gesell to LCHT has been getting newer progresses, newer perspectives because of advances in science and better understanding of development process. Science is a dynamic process, and so is our rehabilitation science. Now, it all started in the year 1977 with George Engels, a psychiatrist, who thought of the difference between the two models. While we doctors were concerned with the biomedical model, there were a lot of social activists and those who started service centers for the community who began to concentrate more on social model. And the social model always was at the biomedical model. Both of them were at loggerheads with each other. The social model believed was the problem with the environment, while the biomedical model thought of the disease in the structure and function of the individual. In between, the psychological model was forgotten. The person was giving was given very little importance in both the models. So George Engels' biopsychosocial model in the year 1977 tried to link, and this was the beginning of an extremely progressive movement. At the same time, a lot of things were happening, a lot of child development concepts were emerging. One of the earliest one was dynamic systems theory, propagated by Bernstein, Helen, and others, 1998. Both of them were psychologists. They brought in a concept, what is called as emergence. When you look at the issues, the whole is always bigger than some total of parts. This is the basic tenet of dynamic systems theory. You look at the left side figure in green, there are three constraints for any individual to function. One is the individual constraints, which are structural and functional. Then there are task constraints and there are environmental constraints. All these three put together produce a reaction or an outcome which is much bigger than the individual constraints themselves when they're acting. Now, let me give you a more concrete example using mobility as an example. Let us give the mobility a value of x. And what are the constraints this movement or mobility has? The constraints of brain, the functioning of brain, the bone, and the anchor muscle, then motivation of the mind, then the movement happens in an environment and becomes refined more with experience. So these are the 6 constraints. And if we were to give value to each of them, the mathematical proposal will be 2 B's, that is brain and bone, plus 2 M's, muscle and mind, plus 2 E's, experience and environment, and you get some total. But this total is much less than. Or let me put it the other way. What happens as mobility across a joint is much bigger than the sum total of all these constraints. It's an extremely good model for us to follow, particularly in interventions therapy and probably even in orthopedics. Now, there was another at the same time, a little earlier though, but it became more popular from the year 2000 onwards. This was the transactional model of Chandler and Samaroff, which proposed that biology is always at loggerheads with the environment. In a sense, they're bidirectionally influenced. Now, let us look at the cell biology and let us concentrate on the environment in which this cell biology operates. Because of this interaction, you develop a lot of neural system functions. We begin with attention, which leads to perception. Perception is the function of executive function. Then executive function is responsible for self-regulation. Self-regulation brings in adaptability and, of course, cognitive development. All these are bidirectional mechanisms, each influencing the other, which makes the human functioning an extremely complex but an extremely fascinating product. According to this theory, children are products of their environment. A child's behavior is a product of his learning history, extremely important words. And learning is only a part of child development. I keep repeating this. Learning is only a part of the child development, and it's not whole of child development. That's why I've deleted some learning theories in this lecture. Now, again, in the year 1986, we had a psychologist, Dr. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who was extremely particular about barriers in the environment. This model is very barrier sensitive. Even now, it's very predominant among special educationists and psychologists. This is called a socio-ecological model of development. And this developmental model deals with the concept of development in context. Development happens in an environment and in relation to the context. Context can also mean the family also. So the context begins with the microenvironment, the immediate family. Then it moves on to the meso-environment. When child gets to school, he has the peers and teachers to deal with. Then it moves to the exo-environment, which is mass media, counseling, and health systems. And lastly, it deals with the macro environment, which is the ideological cultural norms in a society or a community. We deal with educational policy, health policy, and all in this. And this is where mainstreaming and accessibility come into being. You see, from family, we go down to the external environment. The first two systems are active, that is, micro and meso are active. All the others are inactive because individuals cannot change them. It needs a group to do it. Now, another equally important model was Brazilton's touchpoint model 1996, which gives us a window of opportunity for parental communication. As I'm talking, you can see how concepts have progressed from environment to the micro environment. Brazilton's model deals with the family. Now, development, look at the graphs in the left side. Development is never a predictable linear process. It has ups and downs. It's more a staircase phenomenon. And whenever one staircase level or one level meets with another level, you have a point of contact, which are called as touch points. These touch points are opportunities for us to communicate with parents because parents get baffled when a child goes into a lull. There are touch points or that time in a child's development when change occurs in the child's behaviors that can confuse or puzzle parents. There are predictable bursts, regressions, and pauses in a child's development. If it is a progress, parents don't talk to you. But if it is regression and there's an unexplained pause, unexplained in terms of parental perceptions, parents get very anxious. And these are the times when they need a lot of support. This is all the more particular in disabilities when we tend to have long phases of lull in the child's development and the parents think nothing is going to happen. So this is an extremely important model for those who work with family-centered services. And you can see now how all the concepts are interrelated to each other. I'm coming to the family-centered approach. Though it was started by a lot of psychologists in the beginning, earlier to 1998, it was Cantor Group which gave it a definitive form, gave the principles, and really pushed the family-centered approach into the center stage of developmental medicine. Now, let's look at a family. The family has so many things to deal with. Beginning with the topmost green circle, it is the care burden, the family resilience, quality of life of the parents and the child, siblings needs, even grandparents needs sometimes in India, social support, and information seeking behavior of the family. The parenting styles, parents may be democratic or autocratic, or they may be a combination of both. More importantly, parental stress, particularly when the child has a special challenge. There are also cultural and spiritual care perspectives, which are supports in a community in its own way. All these things influence the decision making of families, which will affect how parents are going to take actions, which is important for us. In a way, family-centered approach also deals with what we call as health literacy. And then last but not the least, we have Gerald Edelman's neuronal group selection theory, which was proposed in 2000. And this is a Nobel Prize winning work which deals with what happens in the intrauterine life or when brain is developed. It's marvelous for us to think of the brain development from a single cell to the 100 billion cells or so we have in an adult brain. How does this happen? There are certain primary neuronal repertoire, a set of neuronal groups. When everything goes well, the right sets are selected. If there's an impaired selection for some reason, lot of abnormal neuronal cells may get selected. Now, this kind of deficit in primary neuronal repertoire is supposed to be the cause in structurally important, rather structurally extensive lesions like cerebral palsy. Then you have a secondary neuronal repertoire. If something happens in the intrauterine environment, there can be a lot of constraints and groups with abnormal cells may get selected. And this goes on in subsequent division of the cells. The secondary neuronal repertoire deficits are supposed to be very, very important in disorders like ADHD, specific learning disabilities, and autism. These are the ones which are in the community, which sometimes do not surface till later age, whereas something like cerebral palsy gets noticed very early. Now, putting all these together in the year 2001, WHO and a group of people formed what is called as the ICF, the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health. I want all of you to know the nomenclature, that is International Classification of Functioning, which comes first, and then disability and health. Not that health comes last, but the functioning and health are intermediately interfered with by disability. And that's what this definition means. The ICF framework is now adapted world over, particularly by developmental people, the people who work in the field of disability, because it makes a lot of sense for them to utilize this model. And in the year 2012, Dr. Garter and others, again from CanChild, uh, brought in this concept F words, which are a simplified version of ICF, which we can talk to parents without using any technical jugglery words as we do in ICF. The ICF basic tenets are body structure and function, influencing activity, then participation. These are influenced again by environmental factors and then personal factors. And then with all this, the child has to move to a future which is unknown. So you can see all these supports. Ultimately, for healthy functioning, what every child or adult needs is participation. Now let us define these words. Definition of ICF categories is, you don't need explanation for impairment, it's structure and function. But function also comes in other domains of ICF. It refers to what people do. Synonyms include role, job, occupation, but for children, play is their word. It's extremely important we remember play, because intervention should be all about play and family and not about therapy, exercises, and all those things. Now, the next domain is activity. In WHO terms, it refers to execution of a task or action by an individual. Then lastly, we have participation, defined in the WHO ICF as involvement in life situations. There are also a few more newer perspectives in all these things. Again, I repeat, all these concepts have been extremely popularized by CanChild. Professor Rosenbaum was one of the persons who was involved in the development of ICF module itself. So the words that have been introduced, which were also prevalent in the earlier days of therapy, is first is capacity, is maximum functioning in an ideal environment. Person is always at best. Now think of the situation in our clinics. We have the therapist behind the child, we have smooth floorings, we have assistive devices to support the child, and everything is risk-free. There are no constraints in a clinic, and the child can do a lot of things. But does the child have this support when he moves to his daily environment, in his house, or in the road on which he moves? So what the child actually does in the daily environment is called as performance. Now we move on to another concept called as capability, proposed by our own Dr. Amartya sir. It's a performance as per capacity in the lived environment. I keep repeating that each word in this definition makes lot of importance, lot of sense, and we need to remember each of them. Now look at this. What is the lived environment of a person? Is it not the daily environment? It is daily environment, but his lived environment is, think of a child living in a bungalow or in a ground floor apartment and a child which is in the 16th floor. What is the constraint that a child who is living in a 16th floor apartment has to go through? Somebody has to bring him down if there is no lift, but the child in the lower apartment or in an independent house or a bungalow can move on his own if he gets an assistive device. Even with an assistive device, a child in a 16th floor apartment needs some other environmental assistance, either in terms of people, persons, or in terms of structure. Okay, then we move on to another important concept, That is, we have to measure the outcomes of a treatment. The government will not support any treatment which costs a lot to the government at the end of the day. So, outcomes of a treatment is measured in terms of health-related quality of life, gain, or it's called as HRQOL, defined as an individual's perceptions, various aspects of their lives that they think are affected by a particular medical condition and its treatment. This was again WHO definition in 2017. I repeatedly use the word WHO to tell you that these are universally accepted norms that we are talking about. Then it led to the disease-specific quality of life instruments. Then the health system moved on to evidence-based medicine in the year 1996. This is an extremely important development in health sciences because we need evidence for what we are doing. I cannot do anything on my own expert opinion or my eminence-based opinion. I need to have solid proof in terms of randomized controlled trials, which have the highest evidence. So in between, you have many other methods, and all of us are now quite familiar with EBM. One thing about EBM is higher you go, the quality of evidence is higher, and the risk of bias is lower. Higher you go, it's lower, and lower down, the risk of bias is greater. When I talk of my experience in botulinum toxin, I run the risk of bias because I am comparing my own experience with a larger gathering. Again, another extremely important development, the functional classification systems. It all started with Canchild again. It started in the year 1997. We first had gross motor functional classification. Then in 1997, we moved on to manual ability classification system somewhere in 2006 or 7. Then CFCS, that is communication functional classification system, and the eating disability and drinking ability classification system. And lastly, the recent one is visual functional classification system. To say this marvelous system, all that you have to do is check one level and you get the whole functional profile of a child. This functional classification is extremely important for therapists and again for surgeons when they have to prove what they are doing, particularly the orthopedic surgeons and of course all others, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and eating specialists, eating and drinking specialists, and of course the vision therapists. So this is a way of proving where our child is moving. Then came the community-based rehabilitation module, which was again ratified by WHO in the year 2010. Now, community is a group of people residing in one geographical area, sharing common needs, social, financial, and economic needs, but they may have different value systems depending upon their faith and religion, which does not come into community. Now, this is called a CBR matrix. There are CBR goals and there are CBR areas. The CBR goals are improving health, education, livelihood, social, and empowerment. And these are the things, they're all colored in different way. The light blue one is for health sector. Then the green one is for schools. Then you have the community red one in for community-based rehabilitation centers. Then you have the pink one for independent living centers, which are extremely rare in India. We still have families taking care of their children with disabilities. The yellow one is for vocational rehabilitation centers, which are springing up all over these days. And of course, the pink ones are the other government setups, NGOs, and business sectors. I think I'm moving to another important concept, which was popularized again by a group of psychiatrists led by Dr. Alan Colliver of England in the year 2009. Quality of life is an individual's perception of his position in life with regards to health domains. Now you see this beautiful concept. It's a conceptual dynamic between individual and environment. This specifically talks about individual and environment in a more precise terms than the other models we were talking about. Now think of this interaction between environment and the individual, which is influenced by culture, standards and concerns, value systems, and of course, most importantly, goals and expectations from the person with disability and from the family and the community surrounding. The last model we are going to talk about is Life Course Health Development, LCHD. It's an emerging biopsychosocial model that conceptualizes health development occurring through transactions between the person and environment over time. Please note this, it's a lifespan approach, it happens over time. What is central to this theory is that experience during the whole trajectory. When we talk of trajectory, we talk of the trajectory from reconception to the geriatric age group. Experiences are extremely decisive in the life course health development, proposed by Haflam et al. In the year 2014. Now, look at the graphs below. Now, the light blue one is the one from a child coming from a high social status, which has, we presume that high social status has positive parenting. So look at this. The x-axis is health development, the y-axis is the transition from preconception to geriatric age. So when the child goes through these transitions, a high-income group is likely to have more positive parenting, he is likely to have more access to care, and so he may move with little fluctuations in the childhood till adolescence. In adolescence, because of the overprotective nature of high-income groups, the child may end up with obesogenic environment, which is particularly important in cerebral palsy children because movement gets altered. We all have seen functional impairment syndrome due to progressive musculoskeletal pathology as well as the obesity that also happens side by side. Now, once the child has again access to care, these things can be corrected and then the child can move to the adult phase of working, and then with our support and the family support, he can achieve a fairly good work-life balance. The lifespan or life expectations, what we call as DALYs, that is days adjusted to life years, is almost normal, particularly in the level 1, level 2, level 3 children with cerebral palsy, because they are not only the less severe ones likely to be in the high income groups and get all this positive. Now, come lower down, look at the dark blue one, and this is for a child from low socio-economic status. A large percent of children in our country belong to this group. Because of low social status, the child's diagnosis may be done later. The child may incur some of the disadvantages of late diagnosis and late accessibility to early intervention. But once the child goes to a school where everybody is level, school is a very leveling experience for child. There's no difference between a high-income group child and a low-income group in school environment. It is for all children. So positive school environment makes a lot of children from low social status to improve much more, though much less than the other group. And then he is least likely to have an obesogenic environment during adolescence. If he has access to care, he progresses. But when once he becomes adolescent, he does not have much of transitional care provision across the world, not necessarily in India or in any developing country. These children may be exposed to a lot of job insecurity. They may not be high income, white collar job doing people. They may have lower income generating kind of works, so which need a lot of support. So this again makes late adulthood a big problem in lower economic groups. A wonderful concept. So we have moved in our presentation from obstetric care right down to the care of the geriatric person. So obstetric care, I'm just summarizing this. All that I said in obstetric care, particularly we think of the Gerald Edelman's neuronal group selection theory, then all others, starting from the transactional model, the Uri Bronfeld model, touch point model, and of course the family-centered model and the ICF and LCH, they are an exception because they are across, they are not age specific. Particularly ICF is not age specific, so it runs across lifespan. And transitional care, and particularly we have no modules excepting LCHT for transitional care. We have a lot of modules for early intervention, which we need to seriously think about and have an ICF frame approach to therapy. I have been the beneficiary of a lot of work of my seniors have been taught, and I intend to transfer this information to my younger generation because my younger colleagues are the ones who are going to carry the torch in the field of development disabilities in India. IACP is committed to this knowledge transmission. We need to care not only for the unborn child fetus, but to the old age. Thank you so very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Shashikala. I'm ending the recording. So we tested two things. This was streamed live on YouTube, and I was watching it on my mobile phone. And your sound, the quality of slides, everything is just perfect.